and welcome to another video at HasLab. We're now moving on to task 3, which is creating database reports. So hopefully we'll start from question 23 in this case. So let's start from the beginning. So you are now going to prepare some reports for the company. Make sure all currency values are in euros, 2 decimal places. So if they tell us this at the beginning of the exam, it means it won't tell us towards the end. So we need to make sure that all currency values are in euros. So make sure we check that in the report once it's printed. Now, question 23. Using a suitable database package, import the file s16cars.csv. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to go back to the file, and because they've mentioned the word database package, this here means it's access. So Microsoft Access in this case. So what we're going to do is we're going to open Access first. MS Access, blank database, and we then need to go to import. We've got to go to external data, then text file. Now guys, be very, very careful here, because a lot of students click external data, then Excel, because they see the Excel logo on the CSV file. It is always external data, text file. Make sure you remember this. Students that don't get this part right often hardly get any marks in the exam, because it unfortunately messes up the exam for them later on. So external data, text file. Okay. Now we search for the file now, and it is over here. And the file name is S16 cars. So here we have S16 cars, and if I hover over it, we can see that it's a Microsoft Excel, comma, separated values file. So it's a CSV file, so this is the one we want. Okay, we then click OK. We then go to next. So delimiter, yes, so there's a comma between each of the values or each of the fields. Next. Now, first row contains field names in this one, so we can see that in here. When we click on here, we then go to advanced. Okay, so what we've got to do now is we need to make sure that before we actually import the data, we need to make sure that the correct field types are set. So the first thing we need to check is the date. So the date should be DMY, because that's the format that the UK uses, and obviously the exams have come from the UK, so it should always say DMY. Often students tend to have import errors if they leave it as MDY, month, day, year, which tends to be the American format. Okay, so we then click, we then check the fields now. So what I should be doing is checking that the VIN number is text. So this is a unique number for each car. Okay, so if it's unique, that must mean it's a primary key. In fact, lower down we can see here that it says set the VIN key as a key field, which means a primary key. So what we'll do is we'll just make sure we go back. So VIN is a type of text, good. Model was text, power is text, engine size is text. Look here. So we can see here that the engine size, according to the database, is a long integer. Now, this is why we always go through this step and not change at the end. So if I click in here and I go to text, okay, the cost price is in currency. So in here we choose currency. The color is text, distributor is text, dispatch is Boolean, so Boolean is always yes, no. Okay, and we then double check these once more just to make sure, otherwise we may lose some time in the exam. So in here it also says display in the report as yes, no only. Records whether a car has been sent out from the port or not. So we need to make sure that we understand the context of what this data is supposed to show us. So power here, it says the power source of a car can either be a petrol or diesel. We have the models here. This is in cubic capacity of the engine where relevant, to be displayed in specific currency format. So we just need to make sure that we look at the information and we understand clearly what the examiners want us to do. Okay, so I think that that's good now. So these are okay. Click OK. Click OK, then go to next. Next again. Here it says that the primary key, we want to choose a primary key, and our primary key should be the VIN number, which was also in the exam paper. So set the VIN field as the key field. Okay, so we then go to next. Next, it doesn't mention anything about the table name in the exam paper, so we'll go to finish, and now hopefully it should import. Okay, so close, make sure that we can't see any import errors, then open the table. Now we can see all the data looks okay in here. Now what happened before, guys, with the engine size, the engine size, the database picks it up as a number, a long integer. The reason it's done that is because it's probably looked at the first field and decided, right, if the first field's a number, then all of them must be numbers. So what it didn't do, it didn't pick up the NA. So if you left it as an integer, okay, then we would have had a problem with the NA importing. Okay, so this is why we need to always make sure that we check the data types and the field names before importing. So just flick through. At the moment, the currencies are in euros. In pounds. We can change them to euros a bit later. Colors, distributors. Over here, dispatch has a -1 and a 0. So what we need to do here is we need to really change this. So if I go to home, then design view. In here, if I go to yes, no, under the format, I can click on it as yes, no. Okay, we can then close the table. Do you want to save? Yes, and now we have them displayed as yes and no's. Okay, so far we've imported the data. We're now moving on to question 24. So question 24 says import the file S16 distributors.csv as a new table in your database. Set the distributor code field as a key field. So we then go through the same steps. So I'm going to close this table first. So we close this table. We then go to external data and text file. Remember, we said students often make that mistake. So text file again. Browse S16 distributor.csv. Just hover over it and make sure that it is a comma separated values file. Double click. Okay, we then go to OK. We then go to delimiter, yes, next. First row contains field names, yes it does. Click here. Then go to advanced. And here if I look at the field names, we can see what data types these should be. So it looks like this should be text, 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 text. And I think, so address would normally be text, city is text, region is text, port is text, and so is country. Remember here, guys, that if it was a telephone numbers are always text, never numbers. Okay, so just make sure of that, please. Any date should be DMY. We click OK. We then go to next. Next again. In here, it says choose a primary key, and the exam paper says set the distributor field as a key field. So here, under 24, set the distributor code as a key field. So what we then need to do is set that, go to next, and next, leave it. It doesn't ask for a specific table name in here. So we can then click finish and close. And now we've also imported the distributors table. Now, in evidence 3, it says take a screenshot evidence showing the field names and data types used in the two tables. Insert these screenshots into your evidence document. So what evidence do the examiners want? The examiners want you to do to print screen there. So design view. So right mouse click, design view. So they want us to print screen this. Make sure here that the primary key is also set. Okay, so make sure that the primary key is also set. Okay, so this is one print screen, then close. And then if I go to cars, my second print screen is here as well. So primary key is set to VIN, and we just make sure that all of the field types are the same. So that's an easy 6 marks here. Okay, so moving on to question 25. In question 25, it says create a one-to-many relationship as a link between the distributor code field in the distributor table and the distributor field in the cars table. Okay, so how do we make relationships? Now, this may be new to some of you, but hopefully it shouldn't be. So what we need to do here is we need to link both tables. So we've got to go to database tools, then we've got to go to relationships, and in here we've got to select, okay, so by double clicking or clicking add, both tables. So make sure that we can see both tables in here. Then we extend the size of the table so we can see all the fields. And the exam question says create a one-to-many relationship as a link between the distributor code field in the distributors table. So here we have a distributor code and the distributor in the cars table, which is over here. Now, what you've got to remember here, and this is really important, that whenever we make a relationship, it is always the primary key that moves. Basically, guys, when I create a relationship, I never make a relationship with anything but the primary key. Now, in this exam paper, they've asked you to, they've given you what the relationship is. In the next exam paper, they may not. So, what you should remember that you can never, for example, do this. So, select, for example, first name, and then go to distributor and create the relationship that way. We can see here that it says undetermined. In most cases, the relationship will be a one-to-many relationship, and in some cases it may be a one-to-one relationship if it's between primary keys. But in 95% of the time, it's always a one-to-many relationship. So we know that that can't be right. So it is always this that is always the primary key that moves. Now, you're probably asking yourselves, okay, so why isn't it the VIN number, okay, that moves into here somewhere? It's because the link, the same sort of data must be in both tables. So if I look at my distributors table, we can see here, these are my distributor codes. If I go to my cars table, look, so I'm looking for BMDAG. If I go to my cars table, can I see BMDMG anywhere? Yes, I can, because I can see them in here. So EMDSA, BMDAJ, etc., etc. Okay, so these are so this is where the relationship is created. Okay, this is how the whole relationship works. Okay, so the primary key of that table is a foreign key in this table. So what we can then do is we can then close the tables and make our relationship here. So click over here to distributor, enforce referential integrity, click create, and it basically shows us a one-to-many relationship. Just be aware here, guys, that sometimes you may get an error message if you click on enforce if you click on enforce referential integrity. If you get an error message and you know it's definitely right, then just unselect enforce referential integrity, click OK. The examiners will still give you a mark. Okay, so even if I leave it like this, the examiners will give me a mark. Now, the evidence for the relationship is this. What the examiners are looking for. They're looking for a one-to-many relationship here. They're looking for distributor code in the distributor table, and they're looking for a distributor in the cars. So this is where you're going to pick up the marks for the relationship. Okay, so you add this, get a print screen of this, put it into your evidence document, okay, and make sure that this information is clear in there. Okay, so now we've created the relationship. So that's question 25 complete. Now, question 26 says insert these three records into the S16 cars table. So what I'm going to do is just show you how to insert, and then I'll pause the video, do them quickly, and then we'll carry on. So what we do here is we're going to close the relationship. Okay, we then go into cars, and the examiners have asked us to insert these fields. So what we do here, guys, is you basically scroll right to the bottom, okay, of the table. So we'll go right to the bottom, and here we can see that we now have the fields. Now, what the examiners have said, okay, in the past is they don't ask you to type much, but when they do ask you to type, it must be accurate. Okay, so anything you're asked to type must be exactly the same as what's on the exam paper. If you miss a single thing, the examiners won't give you a mark, because you should be able to basically proofread, should be able to double check, okay, anything that you've typed in. So the first one is 376C, capital C, 154223002. Okay, and the model was micro Z, so micro capital Z. The power type is H. The engine size is 1200. The cost price is 11,000. The color is blue. The distributor is FMD SA, and the dispatched is no. Okay, so that's how you do the first. I'm just going to pause the video now and quickly do the others. Hey guys, right, okay, I've just typed them all in now. I noticed before I made a small mistake with the power type here, so I've just changed it from H back to D. And at the moment I've got the exam paper in front of me, and I'm just double checking that everything that I've typed in is accurate and correct. Okay, so yeah, okay, so that's now done. So in the exam paper then says check your data entry for errors. I've just checked it, save the data. So I just go to save. Okay, so that's done. Now, question 27. Okay, now says produce a report which contains a new field called delivery price. Now, what I need to do here, guys, whenever we see this word produce a report which, we've always got to identify the queries and what needs to be done in the query and what needs to be done in the report. Now, I always say to my students that obviously when you're up against the clock, the exam technique is key, because you're going to hear people printing away, typing away, and you're going to think, why am I so far behind? And you're going to be looking at that clock and seeing the time run down. So what you've got to do is get yourselves into a routine where even if you're under the clock and you're kind of struggling, you at least have something on paper that you can follow. So in here, guys, what we're going to do is going to look at some key things that we're going to identify, everything that's in the query and everything that's in the report. Okay, so I'm going to highlight the things that are in the report. Okay, so if I go to here, so this over here is a query, because whenever you see that it's calculated at runtime, this means it's always in the query. So I'm just going to annotate this and I'm going to highlight text. Okay, so this is part of my query. Shows only the records where the country is France and the cars have not been dispatched. Now, where it says shows only the records, it is normally in the query if they're asking for something in particular. So here we have a number of countries, so this is basically all of our cars. So here we have a number of countries, so they only want the cars that have been dispatched, okay, from France. Okay, so what we're going to do is this over here is also in the query as well. So I'm going to highlight this, and in the exam paper I'd write a Q, okay, and an R next to the exam paper to make sure that I don't get lost in the exam. So me highlighting it is just basically writing Q. Shows only the fields VIN, model, power, engine size, cost price, color, port, distributor, and delivered price with the labels and data in full. This is always in the report. Okay, this is in the report. Fits on a single page wide in the report. Has a page orientation of landscape in the report. Sorts the data into ascending order of VIN. Now, some students do this in the query. My advice is do this in the report. Okay, because often what tends to happen is if you get used to working in a certain way, it's kind of difficult to go back on yourself if you've learned something in a specific way. The reason being is if, for example, you have to do 2 levels of sorting, so let's say sort by the surname, then sort by the date of birth, what tends to happen is the sort doesn't work properly if it's just done from the query. So it's always best to do it in the report. Calculates the total number of cars in this selection and places it at the bottom of the report. This is in the report. has a label to the left of this number called total cars for France. That's in the report. Includes the heading dispatch manifest port Brest at the top of the report. It's in the report. Has your name, center number, candidate number in the footer, which is also in the report. Okay, so what we need to do first is we need to do the things that are in the query. Now you've got to remember here, guys, obviously in this exam paper the first 2 bullet points are the query bullet points, but in the real exam they can be, you know, the query parts could be on any bullet point really, so you need to make sure that you know what to look for. Okay, so let's start. Now, contains new field called delivered price, which is calculated at runtime. So as it's in the query, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create the query first. So I go back to the database. Okay, so I'm in my database and I go to create. I'm going to use query design, and there is a reason for this. It's the fact that we can see all the fields. So now, because we're working with many more fields, okay, we've got to see, it's easier to see all the fields. The problem is, if I select all of these fields, then it's going to be too much information in here. So what I need to do is I need to go back to the exam paper, okay, and although it says it wants these fields in the report, we know that they're obviously going to need these fields in the query as well. So I'm going to go back here, so I need to select VIN, model, let's just go back, so I select the VIN number. Oops. So here I select the VIN number. It wants me to also select the model, power, engine size, cost price, color, port, which is over here. So look what happens here now, guys. So because we have the relationship, we can basically find the port from the data from the query as well. So port, distributor, and they also want a field called delivered price, which needs to be done in the query. So if I click run, can you see here, guys? So we have all of this data, but we get this information here from the distributor table, okay, but it's obviously for this car. So this is the benefit in having in creating relationships, because we're not duplicating. If we had this in a single table, we'd be duplicating all of this information, okay, for basically pretty much for every single car. So in here we only want these ones over here, okay, so we only have it listed once in distributor, but because of the way that the query works, it can basically match up, it can look up the port and the country for every single car. Okay, so we go back to the query, which is over here, and I think so far so good. Now let's create this. Let's create the calculated field. Now, what we need to do here, guys, is we've got to create a new field that runs at runtime. Now, the way we make a new field is you've got to go to a new field. So this is a new field. What they mean by that runs at runtime. So add something in here. When I press run, okay, at runtime, it means it's going to calculate something as soon as I press run in real time, basically. Okay, so the field name is called delivered price. Make sure that I type exactly the same, underscore, capital P, R-I-C-E. Now the way we tell the database, this is our field name here, is by putting a colon here. This is how the database knows that this is going to be the name, the field name. What we then do, guys, is calculate the runtime. This field will calculate the cost price of the car plus a standard delivery charge. So what can we see cost price in here? Yes, we can. So because it's a field in here, we have to add square brackets. So this is how we tell Access that I want the information from this cost price here, the cost price that's in the cars table. So we type cost underscore price, cost price plus, so it's that field, I made a mistake here, should be square bracket, plus 200. Okay, 200 euros. I click run. Now, does it show me? Then I need to check it. So can I see the table, the field name? Yes, it's called delivered price. So remember, it's called this because we put the colon after it. And we need to check to see if this is accurate. So can I see cost price in here? Yes, I can. So 7,500 plus 200 equals 7,700. Okay, which is accurate. So that's fine. So we've done that. So what I would do in the exam is, once I've done that, I would basically tick this off just to say that I've done it. So I'm just going to change the color here, tools, annotate, and I'm going to strike a line through. Okay, so that I've done it. So I would pretty much do this in the exam. I wouldn't put a line through, I'd just maybe put a tick on the end over here. So just put it over here. Now, shows only the records where the country is France and the cars have not been dispatched. So what we need to do is we always start from here. Okay, so I'm looking for a country called France. So where am I likely to find this information? It is not here. Okay, so what I've got to do is I need to add country in here. Now, this is where, okay, if I go back to the exam paper, we can see here that it doesn't show us France here. So this is the information they want in the report. So what I need to do is I need to add, okay, a new the country, a country field in the query. So if I go to design view, in here I've got to add the country as well. So I go to the country, I click run. Does it show me the country now? If I scroll across, yes it does. And we can see here, in fact, the fastest way to, instead of flicking through and seeing if they're all France, you can click on here and we can see that in the record it's going to show us, or in the field, it has France, Germany, Netherlands, Spain and the UK. Now guys, never make the mistake of filtering this, okay? Because if you try and filter it and put France, it shows in the filter, but the data may not show in the report, okay? And this isn't how the examiners want you to do it. It's not really good practice. So what you've got to do in databases is you've got to actually go back to the query, go to design view, then go to the country, and in here, under criteria, and here's criteria, under criteria, you've got to type France in here. Okay, we then click run. Now, then I double check. So I scroll across and I check in here. So at the moment I can see France. If I click on here on the drop down menu, we can only see France in here. So we know that that's definitely well. So this is a good way for us to double check ourselves. Okay, so click OK. Now we can see in here that we still have 151 records, which is just way too many. Okay, so we still need to do something else. So if we go back to the question paper, it also says, okay, well the country is France and the cars have not been dispatched. Now, where can I get this dispatched information from? Because I'm pretty sure it didn't ask us to add dispatched in here, because it didn't say it wants a dispatch field. Okay, so what we need to do is we also need to go back to the query. So go back to the design view, and here we've got to look for, can we see dispatched anywhere? Yes, we can. So we double click on dispatched, we then view the report quickly, so run it. Okay, if I scroll across, we can see here that it has dispatched, and at the moment dispatched is either selected or not selected. So remember we said it was a Boolean, which means yes or no. So it has both yeses and nos. So what we need to do is we need to go back to design view, go to the dispatch field, and under criteria we type no, that have not been dispatched, which means it's a no. So if I click run, it should show us, okay, all the records that have a no. So I can double check that quickly by clicking on here. Is not selected, which means no. Okay, so how many records do I have? We have 43 records, which is more like what the examiners want. Okay, so we then check to see that there are no other queries. So we've done the first one and we've done the second one now. So we can go to the design view. Okay, and I can also put a line through as well. Okay, so that's that done. Now we're ready to move on to the report, because we've now got a report is really a much nicer way of presenting this information in here, because at the moment it's not really user friendly, it's not really fit for purpose. So a report is really just a nice way of presenting the information. Okay, so what we need to do firstly, guys, is we've got to go to save the query first. So I'm going to close that and I'm going to save it. And in here, we know that the query is called, basically the query should show us the records where the country is France. So I'm just going to call it France, not dispatch. Okay, so it's really good practice to make sure that we know which one's our query, because in the exam papers you may be asked to create more than one query and you may have to go back to it later. So it should be easy to identify. So we click OK, and now that's done. So here's our query. If I click on the query, it should just show us, okay, the cars that have been dispatched from France. So in order to create the report now, I choose the query. Okay, I click on it once. I then go to create and I go to the report wizard. Okay, now in here it says, so make sure that it says the query here. Often students don't check this. They'll leave it, for example, on cars because the data looks the same. So you've really got to check, okay, where you're getting data from. So we want to take the data from the query only and not from one of the tables. So in here, okay, I choose the query. Now in here, guys, this is where we've got to go back. So this over here is why I said this was part of the report, not part of the query, because the examiners only want these fields in the report. So what we've got to do is we've got to select them and also try and select them in the right order. On some exam papers they say in this order, in other exam papers they don't, but often they may you may lose marks if you don't put them in the same order as the exam paper. So what we do here is we select the VIN number. The VIN number, we select the model, power, engine size, cost price, color, port, distributor, and delivered price. Okay, so these two fields are not included. So this is why we said that this part was in the report. Okay, so we've selected them in the order. We then go back to the exam paper, just double check that we have them all. So do I have them all? VIN, model, power, engine size, cost price, color, port, distributor, and delivered price with the labels are fully, so we don't have them with the labels, but we then go to next. Okay, now it says, how do you want to view your data? So we're happy with this. We'll just click next. Then it asks, do you want any grouping? Now, in this exam paper, it doesn't ask for any grouping. But if it said that it wants to group the information by, maybe by model, okay, then by power, what we would do here, guys, we would select the model, okay, and then we would select, for example, the power, okay. But on this question, they don't want that, so we then go to next. Okay, it says what sort order do you want your records? So can we see anywhere where the exam paper said sorts? Yes, sorts the data into ascending order of VIN. So what we do, guys, we then go back in here, we choose the VIN number in here, and it says it wants it in ascending order. So this is ascending, so we leave that. We then go to next. So I go back to my question paper, okay, and I highlight this, or I put a tick next to it as well. So over here, so the sort. Okay, so I just go back to the question paper, tools, annotate, and I put a strike through. Okay, so I know that that's done. Now, next question is, how would you like to lay out your report? So I'm going to leave it as tabular. Now, in the question paper, it says that it wants the report to be landscape orientation. Okay, so here I select landscape. Okay, I then click next. So I then go back to the question paper and I would put a tick next to this to make sure that I've done this. So I highlight it, landscape, and I'm going to put a line through. Okay, so I know which parts of the exam I've done so far. Okay, so then I go back to the exam paper. What title do you want for your report? Now, can I see anything about title in the exam paper? Includes the heading, Dispatch Manifest Port Brass at the top of the report. So this is the title that the examiners want. So I go back into the database and I type Dispatch Manifest Port space breast, close the comma, just make sure it's the same. Yep, okay, click finish. And now guys, just go back into here and we've now got this one here is done now. Okay, so we then go back in, obviously on your exam paper, because your exam will be printed, you will obviously put a tick, okay, or just put a line through with a pencil. Okay, so strike through. Okay, so that's also done for me now. So what we have is we have this left, we have all of these left basically. Okay, so what we need to do now is we need to make sure that everything fits on a single page wide. Now, this is where you've got to be really careful, because what often students do is they, let's say, right mouse click on the report, go to design view, they realize that they can't fit all the information into the report, so they will often go to the end of the report, click on here, and they will drag the report out. Guys, never, never, never touch the end of the report for two reasons. Number one, for me as a teacher, if you extend it, it often messes up the printers, because the printers have to print, they just start printing, you know, hundreds of pages. Okay, the other thing is the examiner say it must be 1 page wide. Obviously, if you're extending this, then you're making it more than a page wide. Okay, so these are the defaults that have been set by the database. So if you have to extend that, it means you've probably made a mistake somewhere. So never touch the end of the report. Okay, so what we need to do now is, if we go to the best view, so if I go back to the report, we can see here that we've got some space under some of the fields, and other fields, this does this because the number in here isn't big enough to be shown in the column. So if I click on it, can you see it shows me the number, but it doesn't show it fully. So what I've got to do is, the best view to do this, if you go to the view, go to layout view. So click on layout view, and here you can basically select each of the columns. So what we can do is we can basically make the columns a little bit smaller to fit everything inside. So here I'm just making this a little bit smaller, just going through. Okay, so engine size, to make sure that we bring the fields. Okay, so and we can see now that a large pocket of space started to open up for us. Now, if you print this like this, okay, you wouldn't get the mark here, because it says that shows all of these fields with their labels, okay, and data fully visible. Now, in here, we can see here that this label isn't fully visible, and this data isn't fully visible either. So what we've got to is we need to make sure that we take the time to lay out the report. Okay, so we can see we've just made it a little bit bigger, and it's now showing us the information that we need. Okay, so we go into here, we have color, just move the color back a little bit. Okay, the port as well. So we can see that the page is now starting to make a bit more sense for us. Yeah. Okay, and same again on the end here. So this is our distributor, so we'll move the distributor back a bit. And last but not least, the price. So if I click in here, we can now see that the delivered price is much clearer as well. Okay, so just move it from the board a little bit to make sure we've got a bit of a space in here. Okay, so at the moment, this is how our report looks. Now, can I just make sure, I need to scroll down, make sure that no information is missing. Okay, so far, I think so good. Yes, and it's within that border. Okay, so we go back to the exam paper, and fits on a single page wide. Yes, it does. Okay, so we go back into the tools. I then go to annotate, and here strike through text. So that's done. And this is also done because we can see all the data labels in full. So we go to tools, annotate, and strike through text. Okay, which is also done. And now, okay, so has your name, center number, candidate number. Okay, on the left of the footer. So we go back to the exam paper. The way we do this, guys, and this is another area that students tend to make a mistake, is if we go to the design view, okay, now watch this and look very carefully. In the footer, there are two parts. There are basically two footers, okay, and there are kind of two headers, as it were. Okay, the first is what we call the page footer. This is what appears on every single page. This over here is the report footer. This is what appears only on the last page. So this here, so the date, for example, appears on every single page, and the page number, so this is what the page is, so this is our page number, also appears on every single page, but whatever is in here will appear on only the last page, or the very last page. So what I want to do is I want to add the footer. They said they want it on the left, okay, so I'm going to add it on here. In some question papers it may say that only wants it on every single page, or they want it on the on only the last page. So this exam question it doesn't really specify, but what I need to do is add it to the left. So I'm just going to move this back over here, scroll across. This is our left of the page. This is our, I think, our date or time. Okay, so make this a little bit smaller, and in here I need to add a label, not a text box. So always add a label to write your name, center number, candidate number. So in here I'm going to write a label. This is going to be Mr. Hassan. My candidate number 9999. Center number is QA066, for example. Okay, I then click View. So I go back to my report. And if I can actually go to the print preview here. Okay, so if I go to the bottom here, guys, click on print preview, what it will show me is what the page looks like. So if I scroll across here, can you see that my name now appears on the bottom left of every page, so as well as the date and the page numbers, okay, because we put them in the right place. If I only put my name in the report footer, it will only appear at the bottom of the last page. Okay, it would only appear at the bottom of the last page. So if I scroll across, it would basically only appear in here if I put it in the report footer. Okay, so just be aware of that. The same thing again with the report header, which appears on the first page, and the page header, which shows on every page. So for example, guys, these over here are in the page header. They appear on every page. However, if I go to the design view, we can see here that this over here, this blue background with the report header, only appears on the first page. Okay, if I put this in here, then this title on the blue background would appear on every single page. Okay, so it's important that we know that, because often examiners will try and kind of trick you and try and ask them different questions in different ways to try and test that you really understand how the headers and footers and page headers and page footers work. Okay, so guys, we've done that. So then go back to the question paper. I can then put a line through this. So I then go to Tools and annotate, so I've done that, so strike through, so I would also do this on the exam paper. Now, the next question says, calculate the total number of cars in this selection and places it at the bottom of the report. Now guys, calculate the total number of cars. What I've got to ask myself is, let's look at the view, okay? Now, what does the question paper want from here? Calculate the total number of cars. Does that mean it wants me to add these values for the delivered price, or does it want me to do something else? I think what it wants from me, it just wants to know how many cars we have in this list. Okay, so do you remember earlier we said that there should be 43 cars, because if we go back to the query in here, okay, can you see that it shows us 43 cars? So I think what they want at the bottom of the report is that number, okay, basically at the bottom. So the way we do this is we go back to the design view. Now I'm going to show you a really easy way of doing this. Okay, so we can select a field that has data. So if I go to delivered price, okay, if I then go to sums over here, so go to sums, click on the drop down arrow, and here I can go to count records. So look at what happens down here when I go to count records. So count records, we can now see that it's basically going to count, okay, the number of records that we have. But you need to make sure that you don't select the title here, okay? We select, okay, the details, this one here, okay? So if I click run, it should show me the number 43. So if I scroll down, what number can I see? The number 43. Can you see that, guys? Okay, so 43. So we know, okay, that we're good there. Now, so what we have is we have the calculation, okay, at the bottom of the report. And so we, once again, I tick that in the exam paper. Okay, now it says has a label to the left of this number, so it should say total cars for France. So if I go back to the question paper, in here they want a label, so we go back to the design view. This is the function that produces the 43. So I need to add a label, so I click on label, and whenever we're trying to add text to a report, it is always through a label. Okay, so it should say total cars for France, make sure it's spelled exactly the same, total cars for capital F France, and that should be, so just move it up a little bit, go to the report view, scroll down, and now we can see that it says total cars for France to the left of the label over here. And that, guys, is how you produce a report. So remember, the key thing is exam technique. Okay, make sure that as you work through the exam, you basically tick off, or in fact, you specially mark the P's and the Q's for, sorry, the R's and the Q's for the queries and the report. So here, strike through, that's done. We can then go to File, print the report, and that's done. Okay, so that should be an easy 21 marks there. Okay guys, thank you for your time and hope to see you for my next video.